So, is Mike Atchison the reincarnation of the comedian? Is Chad Schubert Dr. Manhattan in disguise? Is Scott Reed that annoying guy selling the newspapers? Who knows? But irregardless, I'm Scott Reed, and I'm joined on this episode by
Mike Atchison
and Chad Schubert.
And of course, this is the Campus Comics Cast, the official podcast of Muddy Monster Comics. We may should do something about that name. Located at 1422 Walnut Street in Murfreesboro, Illinois. So we're here to answer those questions, but also the bigger question: is the detective the reincarnation of Rorschach in Tom King's series Rorschach? We'll discuss that shortly. But before we do that, we're going to talk about our first impressions of Ms. Marvel, the Disney Plus series, and then we'll wrap up the episode talking about what we've been reading. And then, of course, time allowing, we'll do a CLZ shake. So, all right. So we good to go? We ready to just dive into Ms. Marvel?
Let's do it.
All right. So I guess the first thing I need to say about Ms. Marvel is, of all the characters that have had shows and stuff like that, this is probably the character that I know the absolute least about.
Is this probably the newest character that has been introduced into the MC, the comic universe, to have a show? Is that fair to say? This incarnation of Ms. Marvel?
Well, other than like the handful of characters that were in the MCU before they were comic book characters, because you have a few of those like Agent Coulson and the likes. I'm trying to think, but as far as like a headliner, yeah, absolutely, yeah. I don't think there's anything that's, you know, bigger movie wise or newer movie wise or even TV series wise that I can think of off the top of my head.
Same, yeah.
But shouldn't we have the replacement for Iron Man show up in this coming phase of?
Oh, Ironheart.
Ironheart does have a show.
But she's not out yet. So at this time, and then I don't know who actually was first. I've got both of their first.
Riri Williams was her name, I think.
Yeah, Riri Williams, and then Kamala Khan. I don't know who is.
Seemed like they were like contemporaries in the next generation.
Kamala Khan's first appearance was in that all new .1, or all new Marvel all new Marvel .1 or something like that.
One of those decimal books.
Yeah, it's one of those oddball ones. Okay, so she's been around since 2013, and then Riri Williams, Ironheart first is. That's not what I want. First appearance, not just the name of the actress who is going to be 2016. So Riri Williams, Ironheart will be newer once her series actually starts. Yeah. So yeah, but I mean, you know, I guess you also have things like Captain Carter, even though it's Peggy Carter. I mean, that's a new character for What If, you know, so I guess technically a newer character, but yeah, I think I know what you're saying. Oh, so I'm looking at this page, and for Ironheart, they're showing the cast, and one of the actors that's in it is Bolo Young. So I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Bloodsport with Jean-Claude Van Damme.
Mm-mm.
Okay, well, he was the main bad guy in Bloodsport. So I am now very much intrigued by this show, and I assume that it means it's going to have a lot of martial arts in it. So So anyway, that's kind of interesting. It could be a better martial arts show than Iron Fist. Okay, but that's not what we're here to talk about, right? We're here to talk about our first impressions of Ms. Marvel.
That's right.
So, all right. So, Chad, what were your first impressions of Ms. Marvel?
I liked it. That was my first impression. No, that's it.
Next.
No, I really liked she's a very relatable character. Like even though like I don't really have a lot in common with a teenage girl. But but I feel like she's the perfect amount of like outsider that kind of gets bullied, picked on, kind of feels like she doesn't know where she fits in, to where she's a very relatable character, and the actress that's playing her is just like awesome, sells it great in this. And I really like the animations throughout that are kind of put into the real world. It feels very like the Scott Pilgrim movie in that sense. So I really dig that part of it. The goofy dialogue kind of back and forth, it just feels real. It feels like this could actually kind of take place, and you could have some friends that would have this kind of back and forth. I love her. The cool thing about Miss Marvel has always been like she's a fan first, and then she becomes a superhero, and they really sell that. Her excitement
really leaned into that.
Yeah, her YouTube channel and all that, and going to the Avengers Con. There were a lot of really good parts of this, and I was excited going into it, not sure if it was because I wasn't as excited about the things we'd gotten recently with. I wasn't a giant fan of Moon Knight or the Multiverse of Madness movie. They didn't go crazy for me. So this was like, okay, this looks different than those things. Maybe it'll be different. And it was, and I definitely appreciated that. So it's been good so far.
Mike, what about you?
Well, it's one thing. I mean, the word relatable that Shad used is true with the actress and her how she's portrayed this character. Very relatable, as much as a teenage Pakistani girl can be to a middle-aged white guy. I mean, I think they are driving home some good. I mean, the characterization's good. It's just, whenever I'm trying to think of a teenage character characters that I could relate to, and really there's not been many over the years. Even, I mean, it would have to go back all the way to the 80s when I was barely out of my teens then with the new Teen Titans. Even when Dan Jurgens kind of revamped the Titans in the 90s, it felt like a 30-something-year-old guy trying to talk or do dialogue for teens. So I can't say, I will not say this is something I don't like. I think I know I'll continue watching it. I just don't know that I'm catching the bug like someone that's younger might. I think I like the aspect of her being the fan first. And I think there are some stereotypes here. I mean, her parents are almost it's almost guaranteed that the parents are going to be ultra religious and strict. It's almost guaranteed she's probably going to being attracted to some white guy that's in the show. And not there are some I think they're doing their best to make this contemporary and diverse, although I think they're falling short in some areas. But still, it doesn't catch my attention as if it was a character I already knew. It's just not. It's good, but it's probably, I'm not the audience probably that it's designed for. Did I give enough caveats to my my review? I mean, I was all over the place, but
well, again, so this was the Marvel Cinematic character that we've gotten so far that I've known probably almost certainly the least about. But that being said, I actually really kind of enjoyed the first episode. It was kind of nice to really, I have some knowledge of the character, but to kind of learn about the character as we progress and we kind of get straight an origin story as opposed to jumping in, having powers, and backtracking to an origin story, which I thought was a really nice touch. I actually, and then it was nice to get Mike. Did you notice that there was a post-credit scene at the end of the first episode?
Maybe. If I did, it was probably forgettable. But
but they bring in Damage Control, okay, at the end in a post-credit scene.
Yeah,
so
I did
miss that. Okay, so you did see it. Okay, good. So that kind of helped ties everything into the broader Marvel Cinematic Universe, which I think is great. But I actually I liked it a lot more than I expected to like it. especially not knowing a whole lot about the character. So I think it's definitely worth watching. And I've watched all 3 episodes that are out as of recording this, and I'll watch the 4th episode tomorrow whenever first opportunity I get. Especially now that I don't have to double dip between Kenobi and Ms. Marvel, it'd be easier to pick one.
Yeah, don't make me choose between those two, because I will pick Star Wars every day.
There were a lot of days that there were several days that I watched Ms. Marvel first. Yeah. So, but it was only 3 episodes that they were
overlapping. Yeah.
So I'm kind of surprised that Disney released it that way. It seemed like they could have waited till today to release Ms. Marvel. So there'd be, something new. So
they didn't want to interfere with Thor: Love and Thunder, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. And that probably was, which reminds me, I haven't got my tickets yet. But anyway, that's probably one of the issues that this series has had, because according to, I'm sorry, I didn't put down the reference, but the Ms. Marvel series had the lowest first 5-day new views total of any of the Marvel Cinematic Disney Plus series.
Oh.
And it almost has to have been overshadowed by Kenobi.
Oh yeah, I would imagine so.
Because
wasn't Kenobi one of the highest rated or highest viewed Star Wars things or something crazy like that?
It probably should be if it wasn't. But I think it was still like around 750,000 viewers. But to put that in perspective, for Hawkeye, it had like 1.5 million.
Oh,
so
wow.
Hawkeye had almost double the first 5-day viewers that Ms. Marvel had.
Jeez.
So, which I find surprising. But I think a lot of it has to do with people's unfamiliarity with the character, so they don't feel like they have to watch it right away. They can kind of stew on it for a while. Did you catch the Easter egg on the plaque for the school?
I don't think so.
It had a bunch of names, and the first name on the plaque was G. Willow Wilson.
Oh, was it really?
Yeah, and then there were.
I did see that. Yeah.
Yeah, and then there were several other names, which I didn't recognize any of the other names, but they all had ties to the character. So either editing or writing or art or something. So I thought that was kind of cool. I did notice that they pretty dramatically changed Ms. Marvel's power set.
That was my question. I don't know. I always thought she was just a sort of stretchy, expanding kind of a Elastigirl.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So they've tweaked that quite a bit. So now she has kind of this hard light manipulation is the best way that I can describe it. I suspect they did that for budgetary reasons. They probably didn't want to do the budget to show her stretching, and it looked, look good. I guess it probably wouldn't happen on the budget, because even like the Mr. Fantastic stretching in the Doctor Strange movie wasn't great, but I don't know. Conversely, they could have used this as a test run to start testing out those special effects to see what they can do to improve upon it. So I'm okay with it. I mean, if I was a hardcore Ms. Marvel fan, I probably would be upset about it. But since I don't have a whole lot invested in the character, it doesn't bother me as much as I'm sure it could. It'd be like if this had been Captain America and they'd given him a square shield. That might bug me, a lot more, because I'm more invested in the character Captain America. But here it's not as big of a deal, but it is something that's pretty obvious.
Well, they didn't. I mean, the first episode didn't have much. I mean, she didn't really start using her powers until the end when she got them.
Right. Yeah, she just had the
and
one
I didn't realize,
stretchy arm.
Yeah, I didn't realize the stretching visual was expensive, because on the Flash TV show, when Elongated Man came on, they showed him doing that quite a bit, and that's CW.
Well, it was always at a distance, or
that's true.
Yeah, it's not. It wasn't. It wasn't great.
No, it wasn't great. No.
Yeah,
but
it was. So I think that's probably part of the reason why that they've gone this route. So. And after all the backlash there was after the She-Hulk CGI, I can see them not wanting to. It probably was the smart move to do something that's going to look better than something that's truer to the character but is going to look bad. So I think it's pretty obvious. I guess we can kind of talk about some of the story elements, So we have this whole idea of her powers coming from the bracelet, or at least that unlocking her powers. It's pretty obvious that the mother knows something about the bracelets and the ties to the relatives that she's not going into a whole lot of detail about. I thought that was, a little on the nose. And I'm looking at my notes. Is there anything else I wanted to say? I don't think so. But I've been watching it, and I'm going to watch it all the way through, and watching episode 4 tomorrow, first opportunity I get. So it's been pretty good. Except for, I know we're not going to talk about this, but I am going to say that I think the second episode is really, really weak, because the second episode feels like an episode that something you would see on the CW until the very end. So my advice for anybody who hasn't started watching, get at least to the third episode before you make your decision about the series, because the first episode's good, the second episode's not so good, has a strong finale, but then the third episode gets better, I think.
When you say it's like CW, is it just sort of teen heartthrob type stuff?
Googly eyes, angst, all that type of stuff. Yes, there's a lot of that in the second episode. I feel like that's kind of what I remember from the second episode. So, Shad, you watched the second one as well, right?
Yeah, I've watched everything.
Did you think that the second episode wasn't as strong as the first one?
Gosh, I'm trying to think. I mean, I liked like her discovering powers. I thought that was a really, I mean, it's all supposed to, I feel like they're going for a kind of a different angle of discovering powers and giving us this kind of really excited, just kind of experimenting, kind of goofy teenage awkwardness to it, and they're landing it if that's what they're trying to do. If they're trying to just go like, we're not trying to make this seem like it's going to be a training montage where she nails her powers right away. Like, right. There's a lot of failure and there's goofiness to it, and it's her and her best friend trying to figure out how to do it. And I felt like they nailed that on the head. I do like the stakes that they introduce towards the end of it, and right. And kind of where everything starts to go in episode 3 as well. And you kind of start to see episode 3 definitely does give you more of the shape of what the story of the whole season is going to be. Yeah. It gives you the like, oh, this is what they're trying to achieve in 6 episodes. Yeah. Because until then, it is a very much, it's just, you're not really sure if it's just going to be an origin story of this girl discovering her powers and dealing with her family dynamic and cute boys and whatever, but I do feel like they lock into it. You're right. By episode 3 they kind of go, we are going to do all of that kind of teenagery kind of John Hughesian kind of right. Teenage story, but we're also going to give you this like elevated bigger story that I can start to see how it's going to potentially tie in with Moon Knight, Eternals. Like we're without getting into kind of any spoilery thing, I feel like we're going backwards into like some history that I could see more of these other things they've been building around starting to work together into whatever phase 4 is.
Yeah, there was just too much, googly eye at boys, girls not getting along in high school type of stuff in the second episode, so once we got through that, then it got a lot better for me. So So, all right. Anything else anyone wants to add about the Ms. Marvel first episode?
I don't think so.
Oh, okay. All right. Are we going to grade this? Are we just going to move on? What are we wanting to do on the first episode? Of course, we can't hear Mike Atchison because he's muted.
Why don't we just wait until afterwards? After the 6 episodes.
You don't want to see how your grade changes as the episodes progress.
Well, if you want to do it, then we'll do it.
No, that's okay. I was just throwing that out there. All right, Rorschach. Okay, so we're going to wrap up our discussion of Rorschach, and I feel like after having read these last 6 issues 4 times, this is like, I figure any other story I would be close to having memorized and fully understand what the entire series was about. and I still have to like talk through it just to convince myself that they're actually what this story is. So I'm trying to get it pulled up here. But anyway, so we left off Rorschach at with issue 6, and in issue 6 is where the detective, who doesn't get a name through the entire series, just referred to as the detective all the way through, shows up at Frank Miller's house, which again is, kind of interesting. I'm trying to find my, there we go. Trying to find my library here to pull up this issue.
It's what I call the seance issue.
Yeah. But anyway, we left with issue 6 with Detective Robin's home with Frank Miller, who is in a Rorschach mask of all things. Frank Miller is the one who provided the letters to the detective that were left at the counter at the hotel, and that were used to establish a relationship between Myerson and the kid, which is Laura Cummings. I think I'll get her name. Cummings. Yep. Okay. Miller retells a couple of stories about the seance and how he had some interactions with Myerson, and about Myerson, the kid, coming to visit him. And then in the end, the Miller has the detective listen to a recording where you are supposed to hear the phrase "kill Turley." So that's just a real quick synopsis there of issue 7. So
it kind of depends. It kind of depends on who's the listener. They kind of hear what they want to hear, because Otto Bender, in the original recording of it, he heard them say, "The hill is the task," and he made the connection that, okay, that means because my daughter was buried on a hill or whatever. It's just so I think going in, you knew this was going to be something that would be subject to interpretation.
Yeah, and of course, Myerson heard Will is the mask, right?
Yeah,
which is why he started donning the Rorschach mask. So everybody's got their own little take on what they hear, and I think it, like you were saying, it's supposed to be, a little open for interpretation. I did like, how they gave us the Amazing Fantasy 15 homage with the Pontius
Pirate.
Pontius Pirate, yeah. In this issue, and basically because in this universe, it's not superhero comics that are popular, it's pirate comics that are popular. So basically, we get Amazing Fantasy 15 as a pirate, and then when Frank Miller does what should have been The Dark Knight Returns, it's a story that's retold as a pirate, and made more adult, as opposed to Batman. So that's also kind of interesting here in this.
The Dark Fife returns.
Yeah,
the Dark Fife. Yeah, I couldn't remember what.
I couldn't remember what it was either.
But he stops making comics after the squid attacks, because he kind of gives up on that.
Well, he decided that he did something dark, and then things really got dark in the real world.
That's right. Yeah.
So it's like, why should I shouldn't add to the darkness. So. I don't know. Anything else anybody wants to comment on? Issue 7?
Just that it rocked my world a little bit with like the Frank Miller thing. Was like, oh, this is just like real Frank Miller in a different universe. And I mean, it's not like the Watchmen universe hasn't incorporated, other real life people into it and given them different trajectories.
Like Robert Redford.
Like Red, absolutely, yeah. But it was like, oh, okay, they're doing that. The fact that it was so comics related, but I guess that makes sense if they were gonna make these two comic creators be kind of friends or have a history together to pull a real person into that. But this was when I was like, oh, this is gonna be a weird book.
Mike, you got something else to add? Yeah.
I'm really interested. I mean, I really like the idea that they brought these comic creators, Frank Miller being the young one of the group, and Jorge Fornia's rendition of him is spot on. But you got Otto Bender, which I knew a little bit. I knew that I don't know if Shad knows who Otto Bender is.
I don't know.
He was a big part of Fawcett in the Captain Marvel comics in the early days, and then he eventually went to work for DC after Fawcett shut down. and he wrote and created a lot of the Superman mythology. I almost want to say he's a co-creator of Supergirl. Is that right?
That sounds right. I made some notes like for the first 6, and I thought that was
Yeah,
one of the notes I had on
that's
that.
what my head says, but I don't know for sure. But anyway, I remember that he had a daughter after he left comics, and I didn't know that he got into UFOs. I didn't know any of that. I knew his daughter died an untimely death in a car accident. So I think I kind of like how Tom King is putting this into this book. And of course, who is the 4th member of their little seance? You had
Well, it was just Frank Miller's friend who happened to know him and got him there.
That's right.
So,
yeah.
Yeah.
So okay. Yeah. So anyway, but that's the part I liked about it, that how they're kind of inserting that kind of stuff into it. Other than that, this is, like I said, the seance issue kind of gives you the idea that there's a lot of everything's in the interpretation of what's going on. So that can be applied towards a lot of things in this book, not just the recording.
And it was Supergirl that he's credited as the co-creator of.
Okay.
Yep. All right. So on to issue 8.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Now issue 8, I struggled with a little bit because we basically have the detective, has detained 3 different men who assisted Myerson and the kid prior to the attempted assassination. And basically, he is questioning them and beating them. And I really felt like the whole beating thing seemed kind of out of place. I don't know, because we really hadn't seen him being,
aggressive,
violent like that in any of the previous issues, So I thought that was a little bit of a stretch at this point. Frank Miller also is arrested, and this was one of the things where we get this very, I call it a very nice homage to the actual Watchmen series. Whenever they take the Rorschach mask off of Frank Miller, and he talks about them, he doesn't want to lose his face, So I thought that was kind of nice. But anyway, so as the detective beats these 3 detained men, at some point they all react to him kind of differently. So they go from being very, and I guess we had to say that they were faking cooperativeness, and then ultimately they're like, "Oh, there you are," and it's the same from all 3 of them after the beating. So, but they are basically going over their story about how they helped Myerson and the kid basically build their practice range for the attempted assassination, and how they all claim to not know anything other than what it is that they told. But ultimately, the answer that he gets from all 3 of them is that the squids are here. So there you go.
Yeah, the kind of violence seemed like he was coming unraveled, like the case is getting to him kind of thing, was like he's getting frustrated, but bringing it out onto these 3 witnesses or whatever you want to call them. But yeah, the quote from the 3 guys, I'm assuming they all 3 said it, because I think they were lined up as 3 panels on top of each other. One says, "Oh," the other one says, "It's you," and it says, "I've been waiting for you." Assuming that they all 3 said the same thing. But yeah, when we get further into this, there's a thought of like, if there is a transfer of the spirit of Rorschach, when did it happen? When does it happen? If you believe that that's kind of where they're taking the story, or how you interpret it, is this part of that? Is this them going, "Oh, our fearless leader is back," kind of a thing?
When he breaks the line for the violence, that's when he's Rorschach.
Right.
He backs up across that line so quickly, though, that it's hard for me to, I have a hard time kind of accepting that.
Agreed. Yeah.
And this gets into, every single time we have a Tom King book, there's always something I'm like, if I'm supposed to accept A, then why did you do B? And this is kind of leading me towards that same thing here with, I'll talk about it after we get through all the issues. But I've got this thing that's bugging me now about this. So
at this point in the book, I agree with you because it's like such a quick turn. He was pretty stoic all the way through. He was by the book. He didn't seem to be very emotional. But then he went off the deep end, and I felt like, okay, this guy King is wanting us to hate him right now. And at the end, that's that scene or that page where they all are saying, "Oh, it is you. We've been waiting for you," or whatever. That makes me think that they finally drew out of him what they wanted to, which was that maybe he is the incarnation or reincarnation of Rorschach. But again, I'm not even sure this isn't just in his head, this last scene.
Yeah.
I mean, that last page could have just been in his head because it just came out of the blue like that. I'm not a real big fan of this particular issue. It moves the story, I guess. But these are, honestly, this whole series could have been 8 issues and not 12.
Yeah. And my thing about it, the thing about it is like, it's almost like he says, okay, I've been talking to you for 15 minutes. I'm going to get up and punch you in the face now. And then go back and sit down and start asking you questions. It's like,
it's almost like a really possession. Like he's almost like he's taken over for a little bit and then brought back.
It was just so kind of odd to me. So I can't quite figure out what I'm supposed to take from that. So
it doesn't mesh.
Yeah. So issue 9, we get the detective visits the site where Myerson and the kid had practiced for the assassination attempt. And this is the place where the 3 witnesses from the previous issue had all gone in some capacity to help out Myerson and the kid, whether they knew or didn't know what the actual ultimate goal was. I don't think we're ever going to know for sure. So this ultimately, so as he moves about this farm, we kind of see some of the events that took place between Myerson and the kid and others who visited them there at the farm, which ultimately leads to the discovery of a dead body with a pager still on the dead body. So whenever the number is called, that comes up on the pager, having survived its time in the septic tank, which I guess is another discussion. It is actually the office of the Robert Redford presidential campaign. That is the one who comes up whenever that number is actually dialed. All right. So here is where, to me, it wasn't the previous issue where I felt like we were starting to really get the transformation to Rorschach. I kind of felt like this is the issue where we get the transformation to Rorschach, because you see even on some of these pages, like on the very first page, you've got the detective standing on the stage and he goes, and then you have Myerson standing on the stage and he goes, just this slight thing. So it's like he is basically mimicking. And I remember from The Watchmen that herm was something that Rorschach would say periodically, so to me, this is where you get that, it's and like every few pages, the detective, it's just constant to this issue.
So the way you saying that makes me think, well, maybe this, at first I thought, well, this is a storytelling device. He's placing the detective in the same scene as Will Myerson and Laura Cummings in the past, so you can see that he's picking up clues.
Yeah,
right.
You can see the clues that he's picking up. Now it's almost like two, I don't know, just two psyches are sort of, overlapping now a little bit. Like he's starting to absorb some of their thinking or their, I don't know. It seems like there's more to it, or the intent was there to be more to it than just that storytelling device.
And they take this idea of the overlap between the detective and Myerson and the kid much further in one of the upcoming issues, where it goes from him just kind of walking their path to interacting with them. And I know that was a big question mark I had in one of the earlier issues.
Yeah.
Whenever he leaves the Turley campaign office and the kid and Rorschach are across the street and they start walking after him.
Yeah, and they're laughing.
Yeah. And so at some point, something got attached to him.
And it's like, when he's pulling up the carpet to find the blood stain where the Oates guy was killed,
right.
The former military guy. I mean, he's actually got the kid right there with him, and they're just kind of, it's almost like there's an interview going on, and he's like, well, why would you put this new carpet here, and why would you put the picture so low? And it's just, I mean, I have to say that the storytelling is really good.
Yes.
Whether or not you're confused by it, the way he's writing this is probably one of his best works.
Yeah, the detective work, the way that in this issue they show him just figuring things out is really well done, because it's like, oh, I feel like I really just like watched a crime being solved. Like, it's pretty cool.
And
There's a page.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say where the picture that was on the wall that hid the bullet hole. That is a picture of sort of the Question analog, but it's
the
Citizen. Yeah, this Will Myerson's creation. That's the black and white, type guy.
I can't decide if this is supposed to be representing the idea that the detective is getting in the head of Myerson and the kid, and that's how he is, this is occurring, or if it's like they're talking to him. I'm unsure about.
I think he's. I mean, I don't know that we'll ever. I mean, like you said, there'll be more reveals later, but this is ambiguous, but it's probably not his most ambiguous work. I mean, it drove me crazy, the Mr. Miracle, the way it ended. But you're right. It's hard. He's not real straightforward, and I guess that's okay here.
Well, and is there a reason why the seance is so, a big part of this is, are these the spirits of these two people with him? Is it essentially him talking to ghosts? I'm just throwing that out there now. I didn't really think about it ahead of time, but could this be him? We've got a paranormal kind of link throughout here in a way that they're trying to communicate with spirits. Maybe is actually doing that this whole time.
Yeah.
Well, I took that whole thing was like the seance stuff was like the straw that breaks the camel's back. It's just a little thing that pushed him that little extra to where things end up. If that's true or if that's the case, who knows? But that's how I interpreted that stuff. So, 10. 10. Okay.
Hey, but before we go to 10, the last page of 9, it's that page where it's showing the flashback of Will and the kid sitting in the kitchen, and they're talking about whether or not to bring convention badges, and whether or not they need to be delivered, or Will says in his Rorschach mask, he says, Redford wants us to succeed. He wants Turley killed. He's going to help us. So this threw me off because of later revelations.
Yes.
So, I'm wondering though why we would read that if it was a true flashback. If it was a true flashback, that wouldn't be accurate.
I think Myerson and the kid believe it is Redford that wants Turley dead.
Well, it's based on what Oates says, right? Oates in issue 10, Oates says this is the story that Bob wants to read. Like this is essentially what Robert Redford wants, and that's pushed by Oates to tell them that. Okay.
I'm confused because I think I thought at the end that they knew they were. No, they didn't. I take that back. I'm thinking of some other people that were actually had allegiance to Turley and not to Redford. So okay.
Yeah. So I think they think it is Redford that is assisting them. So all right. So issue 10. So issue 10 basically takes place in a restaurant, and we have the detective recounting, I'm going to say, a story of how the evidence plays out. So he basically recounts his discovery to Turley's assistant. I forgot, did the assistant have a name? I didn't write it down.
Yeah, Diane Condor.
No, the guy that he's talking to here in issue 10.
Alan?
Oh, Alan. That's the only first name only is all.
Okay, all right. So he's talking to Alan here about how all the evidence and the plan points back to Redford's office. And remember, Alan works in Turley's office. He basically explains how Miller used his connections to get the badges as if it was for a story, And then, Oates got the badges to Myerson and the kid that would get them into the facility. Now, there's a whole lot of minor things that happen in this, and they explain which former Secret Service guy was the one that helped him out, and how the other one said no, and Frank Miller making phone calls and all this. We get a lot about Oates and his office, and the detective finds the office. It's already been ransacked. It's a lot of little minor things, but one of the pieces of information whenever the detective is giving this story to Alan, all right, is that whenever he discovered some things in Oates's office, he failed to mention that he also discovered a glass bottle that had a fingerprint on it.
Mm-hmm.
So after Alan leaves, the detective picks up Alan's bottle so that he can do a fingerprint comparison. All right. So yeah, which at that point we're supposed to realize, maybe the story he's given to Alan is not actually what he thinks happens.
Yeah, and Oates was keeping that bottle because he needed that as well. He kept it in a safe in case things changed for him as well.
We'll call it his get out of jail free card.
Insurance,
what I'm
right.
referring to it as.
Right.
Yeah. So I don't know what else there is to say. We go through this entire issue of the detective giving the story to basically determine on the last page that he's lying to Alan about what he thinks actually happened.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I mean, this is a complete red herring. This episode or this issue right here. And I mean, because if you stopped right here, you would think, okay, this is nice and tight, and this is how it ends up. It makes sense that the guilt-ridden Diane made that anonymous tip, but we're soon to find out differently. It really makes this wrap up quickly. I think the last two issues. I mean, it was to me like a whirlwind, and I had to read it over and over and over those last two issues.
Yeah, and issue 11. I don't know. Do you guys want to say anything else about 10? I'm sorry, I don't mean to jump ahead.
No, I mean, I have notes, but you covered pretty much everything. The whole I talked to Bob, and it's a story he wants to read, and at this point, you didn't know why Oates got shot at the farm. Right. You didn't know. You were like, well, okay, this guy was part of the thing. Why'd they shoot him? But we learned that later.
Yeah, we learned that in this issue. So issue number 11. And issue number 11 has a pretty interesting cover, because this is the cover where the detective is taking off his shirt and revealing the Rorschach mask that's basically his entire body. Mm-hmm. I don't know how we're supposed to interpret that. Yeah. But it definitely is implying that the detective is Rorschach there, or Rorschach reincarnated. But anyway, so here in issue 11, we get another conversation, but this time instead of the detective and Alan, it is between the detective and Will Myerson and the kid. And it's basically he's going back through the evidence again, for the most part, and explaining what pieces of information actually changed from his story that he gave to Alan to what the actual true story of the events is. And, we get all these little flashbacks, of the kid's life, of Myerson's life. And to me, the page that really stands out is page 15. This is the page where we have these four large vertical panels, and the two left panels are Rorschach, and the right two panels are the detective. And again, if this is not where we're supposed to believe that the detective and Rorschach are at this point the same, I don't know what they're trying to convey in those four panels, other than the detective is Rorschach. He is the spirit of Rorschach.
Yeah.
So, all right, tell me what's important in 11 that I'm not talking about.
Well, I think, because yes, I agree. Like this was the issue where I was like, is this the transfer of the spirit of Rorschach? Only because when the detective gets in the elevator, he actually gives a in that, and I think that's the first time that he gives a instead of a If you want to be that kind of specific about the noises, and is that the reason why in past issues we got the difference between the two noises that they make, and in this he's making the Rorschach noise in a way. That was the one thing that caught my eye. I was like, oh, that's the first time I think that he makes that noise.
That's a good catch.
So the kid is sort of the personification of mostly the kid. There might be some Will Myerson comments in there, but the interaction between the detective who's stewing over the evidence and all the revelations that he gets come from the kid, in his psyche. And I mean, it pretty much lays it out, talking about the print on the bottle that was in the safe is actually belongs to the man,
Allen.
The print, the Allen, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, and the man who works for presidential candidate Turley, who we tried to kill. So, it's, I mean, talking about Oates, this is the military guy. Is this the issue where oh yeah. So, he was complicit because this whole thing, Turley wanted this to go forward because as long as he wasn't in any real jeopardy, he wanted this to go forward.
Yep.
But when Oates seen how well the kid could shoot, he's like, hold the phone.
They could actually pull this off. We've got to put a stop to it.
We got to stop because he was loyal to Turley.
Yep.
We didn't know that before. So that's where some of it started clicking. They talked about some other things that Myerson bribing the collector. That's the collector of his art, so that they could switch these prints to make it look like he was the same person as Kovacs. That Kovac, this collector had Kovac's original prints somehow from, I forgot how, but and then we also find out that Diane Condor, the secretary to Oates, her confession was it was coerced. Fake. It was coerced. Yeah. So I don't want to. Sometimes I'm thinking I'm going to talk about something that happens in issue 12, but I'm not sure. Is this the issue where? No, it's the next issue where exactly how she died. But
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a lot going on in this issue, and I kind of glossed over a lot of it, but it just basically is the closer to the recount of what actually, or what we assume actually happens.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the issue ends with the detective, after being shot in the face by Rorschach, obviously figuratively, not literally.
Right.
The phone rings, and Allen is inviting the detective to come to Turley's penthouse, to his offices, to discuss his findings.
Yes, and at that point, you might as well say he's Rorschach.
You might as well, yeah. And I think that's what we're supposed to believe.
Okay, so answer me this: who is this sort of Sandy? Sorry.
Riddle me
this. Yeah, this Sandy, the guy in the last page, getting ready to get on the elevator with the sandy-colored hair. He sort of looks like Allen, but he didn't have a mustache. So who is this guy?
He was I think he's just a random guy he bumped into in the elevator on his way to Turley's place. And it was to kind of give a little bit more about the Rorschach universe, because like he's talking about how New York is dead and LA's where everything happened because of the squid attack. So he's just kind of talking about the way the environment is, and I don't know, maybe it's just a page filler. I don't know. But maybe it's just for that last panel that Shad pointed out, right?
Yeah, saying Herm. Yeah.
Herm instead of So.
Yep. Yeah, I don't think I have anything else. I mean, we know Diane was murdered. We know that the detective was hired solely to find that tape to be used as cover. I mean, this is pretty elaborate. You got to give these guys credit if they really what they wanted to do, using him as a patsy, and they planted enough clues to convince him that Turley needed to die because he's part of the squid plot.
Now he didn't actually find the tape, because we'll talk about that in the 12th issue. It wasn't a tape that he actually found.
Right.
Talk about that in the 12th issue.
Okay, yeah. Yep. Okay.
So, yeah.
Well, we lost Shad.
I didn't. Oh, did we? Oh, okay.
Yeah, his internet dropped and he just sent a
Oh.
note. So
Oh, okay. So, well, he'll pick it back up in here. We can we'll let him comment on it when he gets back in here. So,
we will struggle on.
all right. So, 12. All right. So, issue 12, the detective and Turley's assistant Alan basically are going to a meeting with Turley to discuss the results of the detective's investigation. The detective implies he has evidence on a cassette tape. And of course, there's that whole scene outside the office where the Turley's guard doesn't want to let him in because he's not supposed to let any recording devices into Turley's office. Alan's basically saying he has to have it. That's the whole reason why they're there. So ultimately, he lets them pass. So after some conversation back and forth between Turley and Alan and the detective, basically they're like, okay, let's play this tape. So the detective goes to play the tape, and instead of actually playing the tape, he beats to death Alan and Turley because he's come to the realization, apparently as Rorschach, that Turley needs to die. So as he is leaving, he then pushes play on the cassette tape, and it's not a a confession or anything like that. It is a cassette tape of one of Turley's speeches.
Yes.
So as he leaves, the guard outside wants to know why he's leaving by himself, and it's like, they kicked me out because Turley's wanting to practice his speech. And the guard listens, and he hears Turley making a speech, in the background, and it's like apparently like a 45-minute speech or something like that. So this gives the detective time to get out of the building. And what does he do? He heads to a local movie theater, pops in a little late to the show, and watches the movie Pontius Pilate.
Yeah.
With his popcorn. And did he have a drink too?
I think he had a soda or something. Yeah. I mean, still covered in blood, except for his overcoat covered it. But
I guess he washed his hands before he started eating the popcorn.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. I mean, I didn't get he's parking at the valet at the hotel. Says, "Oh, what happened to your car?" He's got a big, it's kind of mashed in on the front. And he goes, "Oh, a hit and run." What is that from?
I couldn't figure that out either.
I don't know. I'm not for sure. That's a good question.
And
it was a deleted
panel
scene.
That panel just before, you see where he's looking at his watch before he decides to go to the movies. You see what time it is?
That's probably something before midnight. Yeah.
Yeah, the doomsday clock type thing, like 9 minutes till or whatever. Yeah, I didn't expect this to happen this way. In fact, I thought that whenever he was killing Turley and Alan, I thought that the gurgles and the old gods and everything was a recording of Diane Condor being drowned. Because she was actually murdered instead of killing herself.
But if you look, I mean, the one thing that's the tell on that, whenever you read it multiple times, as we all have, is that whenever the tape is playing, you get the little, like the electrical line quote line going to the cassette tape, and all those other ones are not those sound effects going to the cassette tape. Yeah. So it's very subtle, but yeah, once you have read it once, like, oh, it's obvious that there's not anything playing on the tape until you actually see the click later on, because the first time, he goes, you don't get that click whenever he puts his hand on the tape.
And he didn't just beat him to death; he broke those bottles and pretty much stuck him in the neck with it.
Yeah, I could. Yeah,
that is definitely a Rorschach move. That is Rorschach type violence and calmness. And if there was nothing else that showed that he had made the full transition, this was it. I don't know. Did you guys feel like this was a satisfying ending?
No.
I actually did think that it was a relatively satisfying ending because, we kind of see the end result. But and the people who were responsible for the attempted assassination, they met justice.
Yeah,
at the end.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I think the bad guys in the end, even though the detective has been our protagonist the whole time, he's now the not so great protagonist. He's the anti-hero, whatever. He has no morals. He sees things in black and white. The true bad guys, though, were Turley, and there was no ambiguity about that. Alan was sort of a ding dong, just kind of playing along. So I think they got their just desserts. It's probably, out of a lot of King's works, the most satisfying out of things like Mr. Miracle and Adam Strange and some others. Omega Man, I read that. So this was one of the better ones. And I for nothing, no other fact, this could have been a detective story that didn't involve any, Watchmen characters.
Yeah. I mean, he could have just recounted. He could have just recounted what he learned to the police, and they arrest them. And I think that would have been just as satisfying of an ending. I'm sorry, Shad, go ahead.
No, you're good. I just felt that same way, and I was seeking answers. After reading this, it was like, am I missing something? Is there, what is it? And so just got online and was looking at a lot of thoughts on that side of it, and it was one of those things I saw a lot of was, this could have done well even without a Watchmen tie-in. It would have been a really good story without that. And it's fun that it ties into that. It's cool that it's living in that world, but it doesn't give us any more of the Watchmen story in that side of it. And that was kind of like, oh well, it would have been cooler if we were acknowledging or establishing that the crazy thought that we had at the beginning of this series, that Dr. Manhattan did take the spirits of the Watchmen and put them out into the world. Like, if that
or
was
at least Rorschach's,
or at least Rorschach's in that sense, then we've got something that kind of lives on forever in a way, and then we acknowledge that this is our Rorschach now. And it was so open to interpretation that it was just like, is that what happened? It could have been what happened, and I wanted a little bit more definite, I guess, for my ending.
Well, and I can see that for sure. So
yeah, I think he's a better Rorschach than the one in Doomsday Clock, the Jeff Johns book.
Well, the one in Doomsday Clock, they more closely try to emulate Rorschach, right?
Yeah.
I mean, but don't necessarily do as good of a job. And that story just fell apart at the end anyway. So
I mean, I think I'm okay with some of this vagueness, because really, what else besides maybe the power of Dr. Manhattan is going to allow the slow transfer of consciousness or personality from one human body into another? Only a quantum powered being like Dr. Manhattan really could do that. So
all right. Well, okay, so here's my nitpick. All right. You've all read The Watchmen. You've all read The Watchmen or even seen the movie. Okay. End of the story.
All of these things multiple times.
Yeah. End of the story. Rorschach knows the truth. What is the truth? There are no squids.
Right. Yes.
There are no squids.
That's a good point.
It's all an elaborate setup by Ozymandias to try to bring about world peace. And Rorschach is the one that's willing to die to actually tell the true story of what happened in Watchmen, and Dr. Manhattan kills him for it. All right. So if we are supposed to believe that this is the resurrected Rorschach, then Rorschach knows that the squids are a lie, and all those things about the squids are here, the squids, he's not going to believe it because he knows it's not the truth. That's my problem with this story, is that if it is Rorschach, which I think is what Tom King wants us to believe, that then Rorschach would not have been deceived by the fact that the squids are not actually the problem.
But did he ever?
Yeah, did he?
Did he ever acknowledge the squids?
Well, but he, there's that whole scene with the beatings, and what do they basically tell him? The squids are here. That's what he
Yeah.
took from that whole beating scene. So which I think is one of the things that moves him towards,
Mm-hmm.
becoming Rorschach if he isn't already that.
Right.
And I think I don't know, that just causes it to miss. We need a little different motivation in this story instead of something about the squids. So that just, that's my nitpick. If I can get past that, I think I'm good. But I just got to decide if I can get past that or not.
Oh, I can definitely get past it, because I almost think that I don't think there's anything that says that this Rorschach, the detective, believes that the squids were real. I think that scene with those three guys he had beaten up, to me, it was almost like they were recognizing him as Rorschach coming through, not necessarily any squids. But again, it's all. I mean, honestly, that makes a good writer. I mean, first of all, to cause someone to read a book or a story this many times over,
Right.
that's a sign of success. And then another sign is that you can read it in different times and talk amongst friends and come up with variations and conclusions.
Mhm.
I think that's a lot of works of fiction can be that way.
Mm-hmm.
I do like the takeaway that one of the morals of the story is that failing to choose to do good or evil makes you evil.
Mm-hmm.
Failing to do anything, I mean, that was an underlying theme throughout the story, that if you just sit down, was even Pontius Pilate,
Mhm.
have I done enough, my lord, or whatever he says, or I forgot, but he goes basically not nearly enough. Hey, yeah, what do I do, or what have I done? And you haven't done enough. And it's like, you gotta, if you're gonna be good, you gotta do good.
I also like it in issue 12 when he's watching the Pontius Pilate movie. The quote that Pontius says, I never learned to care for the wisdom of gods and men. As when you kind of are mirroring what's happening in the pirate story versus what's happening in the Rorschach story of him just essentially murdering the crooked politician, was like, I never cared to respect the words of men and gods and people who tried to tell you what the truth is. And so taking care of that, I was like, oh, that lines up pretty good. I like that.
Yeah.
All right. You know what? I just realized there's something else that I need to reread this for. Referring to the squids. Okay, so referring to the squids, and this, I think, is tying back into the TV series. Redford knew that the squids were a lie, but Turley didn't know that the
Right.
squids were a lie. So then that would mean that either he would have to kill Turley, or he'd have to tell Turley the truth about the squids. And he chose to kill Turley instead of telling him the truth about the squids. I'm going to have to think about that a little bit. So maybe that's the explanation that I need about how he was acting, because the three people that were helping Myerson and the kid were there to assassinate Turley. Okay, it's gonna take me too long to work that out in my thoughts.
Honestly, this is one of those series that you could do a panel by panel analysis if we were good enough.
Right.
If we were good enough, you put this in the hands of some other people, they're going to really, it could be just ripped, just analyzed to,
But there's not that much history to go along with this, because I do not count the Before Watchmen stories as part of Watchmen. I do not count Doomsday Clock as part of Watchmen. So the only thing that you have is Watchmen. You have the Watchmen TV series, and then you have the Rorschach.
Mm-hmm.
And even Rorschach could be considered outside of that Watchmen universe, but it's the closest thing. If there's a third thing, that's what it is.
It seems they acknowledge it. Yeah, they acknowledge it as part of the same storyline.
I don't think Alan Moore would, but
did you notice the technology used, which this is contemporary times, this is like 2020 or whatever,
right?
It's set in 2020, but the technology is all like 1990s stuff.
Well, but okay, so you know why, right?
Right.
Because of the big thing is battery technology,
Right.
right?
Right. Right. Yeah.
Okay, because basically all the battery technology was created by Dr. Manhattan, and then whenever they started thinking all the Dr. Manhattan stuff caused cancer,
Yeah.
they basically
Hmm.
got off the internet, they got off of electronics,
Yeah.
and that was one of the big things in the Watchmen TV series where they were collecting the batteries, right?
Yep.
Mhm.
That
Right.
was all part of
And
it.
that's the connection I was going to make
Hmm.
between this and the TV series, other
Yeah.
than the masks and stuff, and
Hmm.
uh, yeah.
And the
They
So
mention
reference
about,
Utah
yeah,
you
and the mention
Oklahoma,
about
yeah,
or Oklahoma. Yeah.
yeah, about the people, cops wearing masks,
yeah,
and yeah, oh yeah.
yeah. So I thought that was just the beepers themselves. I mean, they only take a
Yeah.
couple AAA batteries or whatever, and
Yeah,
doesn't have to have any lithiums.
yeah. So, all right, time for grades.
Man,
Okay, I'll go first, just because I'm borderline on this one. It's like, is this a series that I feel like I need to have on my shelf? I don't know. So that puts it right on that line of very fine for me, which is like an 8.0. I feel like it's written better than that, but it's not. I mean, I don't feel like I have to have it up there sitting right beside Watchmen on the shelf. So I'm going to put it at a very fine 8.0, which is right on that line. Could go either way for me.
I would agree with you. I'm an 8.0, very fine on that. I that's right where I put mine. And mine has more to do with the interpretations. It really bugs me
Mhm.
that it's smart writing, or is it lazy writing that you didn't give me an ending. I think
Mhm.
that's my biggest problem, is that I wanted some definites in there and I didn't get definites.
did you read Mr. Miracle?
No, I haven't read Mr.
Okay,
Miracle yet.
then if this
Don't.
bothered you, please don't read it.
Yeah.
Uh,
And don't even get me started about my gripe with Mr. Miracle. So
yeah, yeah. So I think this was an outstanding piece of work, even though it was tough to read sometimes, or maybe maybe it was a little bit bloated. Uh, I still have to. I'm going to give it a near mint minus. This is something I do want. Next time I read it, it's going to be a hardcover, and I'm going to put it on the shelf. It's that good. I wish I had it now, because I was going through. I mean, I've got the original copies,
Mhm.
the issues, but I was on DC Universe, and sometimes you gotta, when you want to bounce back and forth, it's not quite as easy. You gotta, but yeah, it's that good to me. So what's that, a 9.2?
Yep.
Near mint minus? Yep.
Hmm. This is one of those comics. It's almost like the most recent Dune movie. It's very pretty, very well directed, but is it good? I don't know. I'm not for sure. So, all right. We ready to move on to what we've been reading?
Yeah.
All right. So, okay. Well, I'll go ahead and put out there for everybody. We've all read Mind Management. Well, I don't know if Atchison's read Mind Management or not. Did you read Mind Management?
Well, I didn't look. I have so much time, so why read something you guys have already reviewed? So I probably will at my own leisure.
Okay, all right.
But
Well,
yeah.
Shad and I have read Mind Management, and of course, we've all read Rorschach, the 12 issues of that. So, Mike, what else have you been reading here lately?
Well, I had a few things earmarked. I could talk about a lot of different things. It's part of the reason I don't get my homework done, because I get absorbed in other leisurely reading material. But there is a series called One Star Squadron. It's a 6-issue miniseries by Mark Russell and Steve Lieber, and they hooked me with, the ad. The ads were showing the first issue cover, and it had all of these obscure heroes on the cover, and I thought, oh yeah, I could really enjoy this. Um, it's it's a dark and cynical look at the effects of mental illness in the superhero community. So you might think I'm describing Heroes in
It's in
Crisis, but
Crisis, yeah.
yeah. So Mark Russell's got a little bit more sarcasm, or I don't know. He's more just more cynical, and I just to give you a quick rundown of what it is, I mean, basically, you got Red Tornado. He's of course, the android member of the Justice League who he now in this alternate universe or whatever, or in this story, he manages a company called Heroes for You, which basically has hired all of these has-been characters like Gangbuster, that's an old Superman ally, the Flying Fox, he was in like the Young All-Stars, the Heckler, another 90s nobody, the Minuteman, even G.I. Robot, which G.I. Robot really wasn't a hero. He was just in like Weird World War Tales. He was just a soldier, he was a robot soldier. But they work, this is how they earn a living. They provide these services like personalized video greetings. If you wanted to have somebody show up at your kid's birthday party, you could hire them. They do, they'll do all kinds of marketing things. It's, at first I'm like, okay, that's cute. That's kind of cool, but it's showing maybe some realism. But when you bring in, Red Tornado, I don't consider him like D-list. He was Justice League worthy. Mm-hmm. And Power Girl's in this as well, and Plastic.
So was Vibe, so he can be.
That's Detroit, just Detroit Justice League. That doesn't count.
I thought it said Justice League of America on the title.
Only the Satellite League in my mind. But anyway, this is so the Heroes for You company's backed by this corporate board that basically works in the shadows, and it's real stereotypical. They try to throw their employees to the wolves when the company's value starts to bottom out. So a lot of this is basically Red Tornado trying to keep everybody's spirits up, that I'll make sure everybody ends up landing on their feet. Without spoiling it, you have Red Tornado. He's almost portrayed too human here. He even is eating a cheeseburger, and I just have a hard time with these android characters or synthetic, mm-hmm. beings eating cheeseburgers. I'm like, really? What are you going to do with it when it goes down the old pipe? But he's trying to save these guys from losing their jobs. He kind of puts himself in the line of fire. Power Girl turns out to be a power hungry, no pun intended, person. She's trying to snitch on Red Tornado to take the lead on this company. It's, I think this was neat to see these obscure characters in a day and age where you have nothing but Batman everywhere, and a crisis around every corner or whatever. But I didn't really like the treatment of the characters all in all. I know the message he was trying to send. It just to me, it made it evident that Mark Russell, sort of like Garth Ennis, just doesn't like superhero characters. He either wants to make fun of them or treat them like a bucket of crap. Mm-hmm. It's just, I get the relevance, but this wasn't subtle at all. And he's
the comic book version of Taika Waititi.
There you go. Yeah.
There you go. Yeah. With superheroes and Star Wars.
Yeah. So I don't know that I'd recommend it unless you're just not a DC guy. It's just really kind of disparaging if you liked those characters.
So nothing like the Bwahaha Justice League though. Then
no, that was like Bwahaha Justice League was not insult. It treated them differently. It was like a workplace comedy, and mm-hmm. it was really good. I don't know who else read that, but
I still have all my issues that I bought. So, yeah.
Yeah. The first 25 issues are fantastic, but it's not the same type of humor. Like I said, it's more stinging than anything. Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow is another series I read. It's 8 issues long by Tom King and Bilquis Evely. And I know we just come off a Tom King book. And I know I had a high grade on Ed, but if we read Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow, it'll probably have a grade of even higher than what I gave Rorschach. I recommend it to you guys. I don't want to, if you do decide to read it, I don't want to spoil too much, but it's like, first of all, you have to talk about Bilquis Evely. I really didn't know much about the artist. She's from Brazil, I think. But her art on this really sets the tone of Supergirl going to an alien world to get away from Earth. So this world is under a red sun, and it's the only way she can feel the effects of being drunk. It's her 21st birthday.
Gosh.
So it turns not everybody liked that about the book. Some people thought it was like, oh, that's not my Supergirl type stuff. But when you know, most of the stories involving her was she's this chaste, goody two shoes, except when she's not. Sometimes she's just brutal. But in this story, that showed a little bit more human. She's had a different past than Superman, and it really plays that up a lot. She didn't lose a world. Superman lost a world that he didn't know. She lost a world that she knew, and the people that she knew. So she's a little bit more damaged goods than Kal-El. So I wasn't even sure if I wanted to read this after reading some of the other Tom King books because of how he does this deconstruction work. But I was completely wrong about that. He blended the superhero adventure into like a space fantasy story, and then planted it in I can tell you this without spoiling it too much, but you remember the movie True Grit, right? The recent rendition of it. You got Jeff Bridges, I think, and
Josh Brolin, and I can't remember who the little girl is.
It's your girl. It's the Hawkeye. It's Haley.
Oh,
Steinfeld.
yeah.
She played the
okay.
little girl.
Your
Mhm.
girl.
It's yeah.
Why is she my girl?
Well, you were a big fan of that show, so.
Well, I like that show, yeah, but okay. That's
I like
true,
her too.
but okay.
My wife really likes her. But anyway, the True Grit story is basically this story, almost to the point where maybe King kind of lifted the plot. It's basically Supergirl goes to this alien planet to get drunk and to be able to feel the effects of being intoxicated. She runs into this girl that's really well spoken, and the girl tells her about how her dad was killed by this guy named Krem of the Yellow Hills, and she wants to hire Supergirl to track down Krem and kill him. Of course, Supergirl's not going to do all that, but this is basically a story her tracking down this bad guy, just like in True Grit. But the true hero of the story is this Ruthie. She's the little girl who lost her dad. And I would say about this Krem, he's vile, or he's bad enough to be an A-list villain somewhere. I can see him being used again. It's really, really good. There's your standard trademark King murkiness at the end, a little bit of bait and switch, but it's still a satisfying ending. And we're literally like one page away, and I'm like, what? They did what? And then the next page, you realize, oh, okay, they didn't do that. So I highly recommend the book.
It didn't turn into an imaginary story, did it?
No.
Okay, just checking on the last page. All right, just making sure.
No. I only got two more books. One is this next one is Astro City. That was then special. I don't know anything about Astro City. I've bought a few issues. I've never read them. I know a lot about. I've heard a lot about it being such a good Kurt Busiek run. It started out at Image, I believe, and then ended up going over to DC and Wildstorm, didn't it?
I thought it started indie and then went to Image.
It was Vertigo at some point.
Was it?
Yeah, it went. It's hopped around. It's creator owned. But what's great about this for somebody that's a new reader, you didn't have to know anything about. I forget what the main character is called, Supreme or not Supreme.
Not Supreme, because that's a different one.
Dadgummit, what is? I know the Samaritan.
There you go.
You didn't have to know about the Samaritan to be able to follow this story. It's basically a group of 5 teenagers. They're kind of superhero types. They're taking a cross-country road trip to find themselves, quote unquote, after having lost a lot of their friends that was in another superhero group called the Jayhawks that seemingly died. And anyway, it's a lot of dialogue. It's a lot of building like a zero issue type story. But it's got the spirit and the tone that I've always heard about with the Astro City line. and it definitely has me intrigued enough to go and really be serious about maybe get an omnibus and start reading. But again, this is my independent pick of the episode here.
It did start at Image Comics in 1995. Okay. So you were right.
What's that?
You were right.
Oh.
He wanted me to say it twice. You were right. There it is the third time. So.
That's so rare. I get that. Wow. Then the last thing is, it's kind of a cheat, but I read one of these once a month, and you both know how I like those tabloid comics, the big treasury size. And there's a podcast I listen to that basically reviews them, just a randomly. And the one they reviewed recently that caused me to have to read it was the Shazam, the world's mightiest mortal. It's basically limited collector's edition C35 from May of 1975. And on the cover, I know this is way before your time, Shad.
Was I born yet?
I don't know. And do you remember? Have you seen any repeats of the Shazam TV show from the 70s? Saturday mornings? No.
Definitely not.
Scott, did you ever watch any of those?
No.
Okay.
No. And I don't feel like I missed anything.
No, they were pretty well. It's about like the Incredible Hulk, and as far as story and technology and that stuff. It's obviously.
Is it live action?
Yeah, it's
okay.
Yeah. It was. I mean, for a kid, man, it was. I don't think it. It holds up well, but it's still.
But
nostalgia carries a lot of weight.
Big time then, yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, the cover features Jackson Bostwick, who was the actor that played Captain Marvel.
Oh, okay.
And it just featured like 4 reprint stories. There was no new material. It's just here you go, The Robot Hunt by Otto Bender. Sound familiar?
Hey.
In fact, two of the 4 stories was written by Otto Bender, and the artist was C.C. Beck, of course. So you have to have a taste for Captain Marvel or Shazam, any of those characters, to at least the way they were written back then. You have to really already want that. It's not for everyone, but and you can only take it in small doses. It's very kiddish, cartoonish, simple, but there you go. That's it. So yeah, that was my obligatory treasury comic that I read recently. And that's it for me.
Shad, what you got?
Let's see. So I've been reading a lot of ongoing new stuff, but I'll save that for last and just kind of skim through them. First, I read a 6-issue miniseries from Image called Vinyl. And this is written by Doug Wagner with Daniel Hilliard and Dave Stewart on the art. And this is it was a serial killer that kind of befriends a detective who's kind of like trying to coax him into confessing to his murders, and he always listens to a certain record when he's doing his killing. But it's not actually about that killer as much as it is the detective is taken by this group, this cult of like sunflower people or something. I mean, they're humans, but they're like the sunflower children or something. I don't know. And the serial killer bands together with a group of serial killers to rescue the detective. And it's really good. It reads really well. But it's weird enough. It had some cool music kind of nods to it. With it being like, oh, because the detective would even was giving him a record that was one that he had used in his last killing so that he could know, because the detective's been trying to catch the serial killer this whole time. And then the serial killer he's like, he's my friend. Like he's has a warped sense of mind and thinks that he's trying to befriend him. So I recommend it. It was a quick read. I really enjoyed it. And I think I've seen Doug Wagner's name on a couple of things, newer things that I'm like, oh, I might pick that up because now I know that he writes some cool stuff.
Who published that?
It was Image, I think,
Image, okay.
in partnership with maybe like Top Cow or something. Something weird like that. And then I've got a couple of Jeff Lemire books that I read.
I bet one of them's gonna be May's book.
One of them is gonna be May's book. How'd you know?
Just because it's recent.
Yes. May's book, issues 1 through 5, from Dark Horse, and this is Jeff Lemire doing double duty, writing and drawing / watercoloring, and really, really cool artwork in this. I mean, it's all pretty much the Jeff Lemire style. There's not a lot of changes that happen with that, but the choices he makes, he even at some point makes all of the panels kind of fit together like a maze. So if you were to like, I saw some images of him working on it, and he's got it laid out on his floor, and it's all like this giant maze that all connects together, all the pages, if you were to have them in single little pages. So
are you
pretty
gonna be ripping up any of your issues and laying them out?
I got to get two of each. That way I can get both sides of the page, and then I got to lay them all out on the floor, kind of thing. But it was really neat looking, and essentially it was it's about a grieving father who lost his daughter, and he's trying to remember her face specifically, and in his dreams and his memories she doesn't have a face, and so it's primarily black and white and some like blue tones to it, and then there's this red thread because she wears this old sweater of his when she's alive, and it's kind of tattered and torn, and so there's a red thread from that red sweater. So visually it's really neat looking, and it goes through him kind of in his head trying to recover the memory of his daughter's face and coping with that death, because she was young in the death, as she's like in like a 10, 12 kind of age, and so he's trying to figure out how to do that, plus move on with his life, and how does he retain the memory of the loved one while still being able to move on, because he's kind of locked himself in his house, and all he does is go to work, and he's divorced his wife because she's moved on, and he can't figure out how to do it. And so it's a really cool personal story. It felt like, in very much the way that Jeff Lemire writes pretty personal stories, especially the ones that he draws himself as well. Those tend to be very internal. And then
I sometimes think that Jeff Lemire and Matt Kent could be the same person.
Yeah. And the other book is his Substack book called Fish Flies, which is he just, I guess maybe a couple months ago, wrapped up book 1 out of a 3-book series. And so if you're part of Substack or you sign up for his Substack, you can download book 1 as soon as you sign up for it. And it's kind of more of a young coming of age story. I don't know if have you ever encountered fish flies before? They're nasty bugs. They're more northern. Like, I've got family up in Wisconsin, and they in the summertime they just are they gather around lights and stuff, and they're just piles of them, and they're nasty. They're disgusting. But with him being Canadian, they're very much are alive and well in Canada as well, and so the imagery that he creates of like stepping on these piles of fish flies is just kind of, it's good if you've experienced, you're like, oh, he's doing a really good job of capturing that situation. But like, even there's at the very beginning, like one of the opening scenes, there's like this gas station that's just covered in them at night, and these kids are going like, we don't really want to go in, and they dare one of the kids to like walk across all of them barefooted and everything. It's nasty.
So is this what it looks like? Did my screen share?
Yep, that's it.
They say it smells atrocious.
Yes. Yeah, it's nasty. But so that's kind of with the main imagery throughout. But essentially, there's a man who has robbed a gas station and killed the gas station attendant, and then is hiding away. And this little kid finds him in the barn, and the guy gets like covered in the fish flies and becomes a giant fish fly, and then the kid befriends the giant fish fly kind of thing, and and it's kind of a coming of age story wrapped in this weird kind of sci-fi creature horror in the middle of it. So it's pretty good. I'm excited to see where it goes in book 2 and book 3 of it.
Now, how do you read these? You have to subscribe to Substack. It doesn't ever come out in print.
I think that he's got a print deal for his stuff to eventually roll out. But I don't think that there's been an announcement of where it's coming out of or when for that. I know he's trying to make it as exclusive to Substack first so that the people who are subscribing and giving him monthly money or whatever aren't feeling cheated by going, well, like, I could just wait 6 months and I can get it in print and not have to pay him $7
Right.
a month, which I didn't do. I kind of hop in and hop out and kind of check in on it. I have his free Substack subscription, and then if I'm like, because right now he's doing a lot of Black Hammer stuff, and I'm so far behind on Black Hammer that it's like, well, I'm not gonna read the stories leading up to Black Hammer the end before I've gotten into that, so I kind of hopped off, but we'll probably hop back on when he gets towards the end of Fish Flies 2, book 2 on that one. Other books that I've been reading that are still kind of ongoing is Twig from Image Comics, the Scotty Young book with Kyle Strahm. And it is like, there's only 2 issues out, I think, right now, but it's like this awesome Jim Henson kind of bright but dark kind of story that takes us through a bunch of different worlds. And you've got this weird little creature named Twig that has to figure out his purpose in life and how he's supposed to save the land. And but it's very much on purpose supposed to be a Jim Henson style kind of book, and I'm digging it. Nightmare Country, that James Tynion IV's doing, the Sandman universe book, is 3 issues out and focuses on the Corinthian, who is walking between the real world and the dream world a lot at this point in time, and notices this college girl who's painting a lot of this creature, this man with mouths for eyes that isn't him, and so he's trying to figure out what it is, and there's this smiling man that she's being kind of haunted by, and so it's this weird kind of mix between him trying to figure out who the smiling man is, and then there's these 2, I think Mr. Agony and Mr. Ecstasy are the new characters that were introduced for this book, are also involved somehow in trying to cover up some things, and it's probably one of the most Vertigo-ish Sandman universe books since they've rebranded this whole Sandman thing. The artwork feels like it's 25 years old. It feels like it's right in that vein. It feels very dreaming when they have a special guest, like artist, that picks up like the dreaming images, and it feels like, because they would do that in the Sandman, you would have like a different artist take on different sections of the book, and so they're doing that throughout this, and it feels really good in that. So I'm excited to see where it goes, and it's not been marked as a miniseries, so it seems to be that part is probably the most intriguing. It's like, oh, they're not trying to wrap this up. We could be living in a dreaming type story for a little while, so I'm excited for that to continue. And then Little Monsters, which is another Jeff Lemire book on Image with Dustin Nguyen, has been really good. They're creating a black and white plus blood. That's kind of the color scheme they've got in this story of these kids that are vampires that have kind of been told that they can't leave this area. They have to, when daylight breaks, they need to make sure that they're back to the certain area that the adult vampires told them to go, and they've kind of gone off supposedly to explore, and they're just feeding off of animals, and they haven't seen humans in who knows how long, because it's post-apocalyptic. And then all of a sudden they find a human, and then they start asking questions like, why are we being told that we have to stay in this one spot? And there's more humans. The world gets bigger as soon as they realize that they may have been told to stay in one spot, not for their own safety, but maybe just to keep them kind of in a controlled area. And so the characters, there's a lot of them, and with it being black and white, there's not a lot of distinctive features, and Dustin Nguyen's kind of art doesn't make a lot of big differences, and they all kind of have that same look. So when you see them, it's not like, oh, we're dealing with a bunch of different, very individual characters. So I have a hard time kind of keeping up with who is who. It's probably my only complaint about the book, but pacing wise, it's been really good. 4 issues in so far on that. And then Do a Power Bomb had the first issue came out as a kind of wrestling book. I'm not into wrestling a lot, but the way that they treat this is like, without spoiling the first couple pages, the mom, who is a professional wrestler, dies in front of her daughter's eyes. The daughter grows up to still want to be a wrestler, and then gets in with a necromancer who is interested in bringing the mom back. So that's kind
What's
of
it called again?
Do a Power Bomb.
Do a Power Bomb.
Do a
You
Power Bomb.
lost me at wrestling, so
I'm not a big wrestling fan either, but I thought it was a cool concept. It was like, as soon as the necromancer showed up, I was like, I want to bring your mom back to life. I was like, holy crap, this is wild. And then Seven Sons, that Jay Lee art book from Image.
I wanted to read that. Yeah,
it's good. Highly recommend it. It's definitely kind of focuses on this weird second coming of Jesus, but there are 7 sons that are all virgin births, one in every continent, and they are all. It's kind of like they're all could potentially be the second coming of Christ, and they don't. It's the prophecy or whatever is that on their 21st birthday, the real second. The whoever the second Christ or whatever will be revealed on all of these kids' 21st birthday. And it's kind of this weird dystopian, but set in the 90s kind of thing where everything is being all of this, all these things revolving around the seventh, what's it called? The Seventh Son, Church of the Seventh Sons. It's all been monetized. There's merchandise. It's very they've renamed they've renamed Las Vegas to New Canaan, and like it's this kind of weird mix of holy but still trying to get everybody's money kind of city, and it's wild, and the art's great. The Jay Lee art is awesome.
Jesse Jay Lee has he's got the lead on the as far as creators before the writer. This
oh really?
Robert Wisdom, yeah.
Well, that's because it's the first time that he's done a monthly book and not just covers in a long time.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's his first creator-owned book since like the 90s, like mid 90s, I think is what I had read. Because I think the last main book he had done was maybe Dark Tower. Was that like the last time he had done?
Yeah.
And
main
did
interiors?
he do? Okay, I was gonna say, did he do interiors for that?
Yeah.
I knew he did covers.
He
for
did
it.
for some of them, not all of them. Some of
Not
them.
all of it. Okay.
Mhm.
And that's it. That's all I've got.
Well, I spent a lot of my reading time here lately catching up on Batman. I had not read any of the Tynion run. So I started at the beginning and made it all the way through Joker War. And it was fine. I guess as good as a monthly Batman book could be. However, I guess the big thing was after reading Punchline, why was everybody so excited for this character?
No kidding.
Yeah, no, it's a useless, pointless character.
Totally agree.
So I'm to the point now where is it Williamson that starts after Tynion, or was there somebody else before?
It's
somebody-
Yeah,
Williamson.
because it's
was
going to be
it? Okay.
Zdarsky coming up, right? Or
That's
Zdarsky,
right.
yeah.
But
Okay.
I thought Tynan was on Detective.
He was on
mostly.
Detective and then moved to Batman
After King
when
left.
Tom King left. Yes.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
So it was, Tynan, and I know he's a good writer, but I don't know if editorial had anything to do with this, but he had to introduce one new character after another.
Oh, it was
Ghost
ridiculous.
Maker and
And
Clown
designer
Killer
and Clown Hunter, and it's just
Yeah.
Miracle Molly and character after character after character. It was very, very tiresome. Yeah, that's one thing you appreciated about Tom King's run is he didn't introduce a whole lot of characters. He just went to the well and brought back all the other classic characters, or slightly different interpretations on those characters. So yeah, it was not great. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't like it's not something I'm ever going to go back and reread either. So. Chad, I know you've read this one as well, but I did read the first issue of New Think.
Oh yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. So this is like that Black Mirror style comic. The first issue is gets a little preachy about spending too much time on your computer and on your cell phone, right?
I reread it last night, and I think my biggest complaint seems to be that there's no dialogue between anybody. It's just it's a narrator. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just narration. Yeah. However, I went ahead and did a pre-order for the second issue because there's a different writer on every single issue, which gives me some hope because it's, if you want, to me, it's like we don't get any new episodes of Black Mirror, so this is probably going to be the closest thing to that, moving forward. So I am going to pick it up. But again, the first issue was not not great.
When did you get your copies?
It's been within the last month, so
I ordered it.
I don't know when I think I probably
have it.
Got it in the mail maybe a couple weeks ago.
Shoot.
Well, you'll have to check for it. Maybe it's floating around. So next, okay, so Eternals. I'm up through issue 10. Still enjoying that series. We're starting to get some of the setup for Acts. Whatever we get to issue 10 of like why the Avengers and the Eternals are going to be kind of at each other's throats here. One thing I really noticed in issue 10 is Esad Ribick's artwork seems to be on the decline. Captain Marvel in that she looks terrible. Her face in that issue. And some of his faces are just really, really bad. So I don't know if he was rushed or what the deal was there. But the story writing still really, really good. Captain America Iron Man, there was a 5-issue series. I've read the first couple of issues of that. I'm not super impressed with it. It's kind of like just the Cap and Iron Man are together and they're fighting somebody who Tony Stark had recommended to S.H.I.E.L.D. and ended up being a Hydra agent and going from there. Kind of ties back to the whole 50-state they had back to post Civil War where they had the 50 teams for all 50. They had a team of heroes for all 50 states. I can't think of what that was called. Maybe Avengers Academy, but yeah. So it's not great. Captain Carter issue number 1. Read that. Waiting for the rest of the issues to come out. I think number 5 might be in my read pile now. If not, it'll be real soon. The first issue was good enough, is all I can say. It was pretty predictable, but I'm gonna finish that series, pretty much no matter what. Human Target. I've read the first 2 issues of Human Target. Again, guess who? Tom King. Art by Greg Smallwood. You talked about in Supergirl how Tom King was kind of borrowing the idea maybe from True Grit. Well, this one he is for sure borrowing the idea from a movie called DOA, which I remember seeing the Dennis Quaid one in the 80s, and then I think that was a remake even from a movie in the 50s where somebody has to solve their own murder. So guess what the Human Target's doing in this comic? He's solving his own murder. So first 2 issues are good. Not they're not blowing me over, but they're still pretty good. I have started the Jason Aaron Punisher run. I am going to give a spoiler on this issue. So the big twist at the end of the first issue is like, why has the Punisher joined the Hand and is working for the Hand? Well, apparently, as of the end of the first issue, is the Hand has brought back his wife to life. So she is now alive at the end of this book. So this is a character that we've never ever seen, the Punisher's wife, alive, basically, since her death. It's kind of like Uncle Ben almost. Mm-hmm. She doesn't come back, but she came back, and she even has bullet wound scars, all over her body. So I don't know. It's got me intrigued. I am sticking with that one for sure. I don't know why I did, but I read all 12 issues of Dune: House Atreides.
Oh,
I read all 12 issues of Dune: House Atreides. It was I basically do remember most of the things from the book. So it was kind of a nice little refresher for the book, but unless you're just a diehard Dune fan, this is not something you want to read. And even if you are, well, I didn't like the book, so maybe it'd be better for you to read the comic because that'll take you a lot less time than reading than just reading the comic. So, or the comic will take a lot of time than reading the actual book. Mike, at your recommendation, I read the first 2 issues of Marjorie Finnegan. I'm not a big Garth Ennis fan. This isn't doing anything to change my mind about Garth Ennis. So it actually is what I am currently reading. So I will probably go ahead and finish the series just since I've got it started, or at least the first volume. I don't know how long the first volume actually is. So I will finish it, but so far it's not really doing anything to change my mind. I did read Gamma Flight, issues 1 through 5. This is that spinoff series from Immortal Hulk. It doesn't really add anything to Immortal Hulk. So to me, it's kind of a little bit of a throwaway story, but it's got good writing and we get to interact with some characters that you don't have a lot of interaction with. So it kind of just gives you some more of what's going on with these characters after they kind of left Immortal Hulk. Up to Iron Man issue number 17, Christopher Cantwell, still really, really good. Don't really know what else to say about that. I know that there's going to be a proposal between Tony Stark and Patsy Walker coming up in some of the upcoming issues. I haven't gotten that far yet, so I've had a little bit of a spoiler on that myself just from going through previews catalog. And then the last book I'm going to mention is I finally read the final volume of Kieran Gillen's Die. And unfortunately for me, he did not stick the landing. I've described this book multiple times as the 1980s Dungeons and Dragons cartoon moved forward and made a little bit more adult. And until we get to the last few issues, that's kind of the way that it is. He did kind of take it could have just been, what happened to these characters as they went into this other world, but he actually turned it into a thing where this other world could potentially destroy our world. So they had to protect us from our world being destroyed, which I thought going a little bit too far. But then in the end, what he does is it becomes more of a commentary about role-playing games than actually telling the stories of the individual characters. Which is I would have been a whole lot more interested in it wrapping up that way instead of trying to preach to the reader about how RPGs are good for people.
yeah.
I want more characterization. So
right. That's too bad. I know you were looking forward to.
Yeah, I really was. Well, Mike, you want to go ahead and do a quick CLZ shake?
Oh yeah.
Okay, well, here, since you don't have your phone out, I've got mine out, so I'll go ahead and start while you're getting going there.
Okay.
And what do I got here? I've got, Silver Surfer. Okay, big surprise. Silver Surfer, Volume 3. Because, again, I only have 120-something issues of this. It's only 10% of my collection. What issue number is that? Oh, issue 31. So, okay, so I'm buying this book because this is still Ron Lim on the art. Steve Englehart is the writer on this issue, and here we just got a lot of Silver Surfer being cosmic. In this issue we've got the Living Tribunal makes an appearance, and we're just 3 issues away from the return of Thanos, which is then leads up to the Infinity Gauntlet storyline in Marvel. So I don't really have anything else to say about this one.
So it came out in what, 92, 93?
Let's see, 89.
Oh, 89.
89. Yeah, this is at the time I was buying this off the shelf. So,
okay.
Yep. I started buying this book around issue 15, which it was after 15. It was, oh gosh, what issue was it? I don't remember. It was after Ron Lim took over in 15. At some point after that, I started buying it, and then I went back to 15. And then eventually, I went back to all the way to number 1 because it took me a little while to appreciate Marshall Rogers' artwork after seeing Ron Lim's artwork, and so it was hard for me to look at the early issues of Silver Surfer because I was so accustomed to the Ron Lim version of the Silver Surfer. But then when I actually realized that Marshall Rogers is probably a little bit better artist than Ron Lim. It's it's just but you have to go for the style a little bit. You have to want some style. So there you go, Silver Surfer.
All right. Let's see here. Okay, we got JSA number 22 from May of 2001. Of course, JSA was capitalizing on the success of JLA in the late 90s, and it may have surpassed at some point the popularity. It definitely had its own following. So JSA 22, it's written by David Goyer, penciled by Rags Morales, another fantastic artist, inked by Michael Baer, and it looks like this is the Return of Hawkman prelude. So yeah, this is an important storyline in JSA. At this point, Hawkman was still in limbo.
I had read that one whenever we did our Hawkman spotlight. I read whatever was that 3-issue story arc.
Yeah.
Hawkman comes back. Is that part of this?
The Return of Hawkman. This was this was the prelude to that separate story or separate.
Oh, okay. So it was a prelude. So
yeah.
I didn't actually read that then. I read the actual story then. Okay.
Yeah, but still, it led to it. It had connection, but yeah. So of course, this is the amalgam of the Earth 1 and Earth 2 Hawkmen. And really puts the emphasis on the ancient Egypt origins and not the Thanagarian origins. So, so that's a good one. That's one of the books I'll probably keep for a long, long time. So,
which do you prefer, the Egyptian origin or the Thanagarian origin?
The Thanagarian, to be honest.
Me too.
Yeah. I mean, I don't mind the Egyptian, but I'd rather they be two separate characters. I like the whole... I liked having 2 different Hawkmen. So
I like the Flash Gordon feel too. The version, yeah. So
yeah.
All right.
Okay, that's it.
Right. Well, we got to wrap things up here. Our next episode coming up should be another episode of previews. So we should have our July previews issue coming up next. Mike, if somebody wanted to reach out to you, how would they do that?
Well, I still haven't created a separate Gmail account for our podcast. I'm going to wait till we have an actual name that really lines up. Actually, I can't blame that. I just haven't done it. The email address for me is m.atchison90@gmail.com.
All right, and Shad had to step out, so be sure and you can follow Shad on Facebook. Search for his band, the Can't Get Rights. And they have 3 or 4 shows coming up over the next couple of months. So definitely want to check that out. I should go ahead and mention coming up July 23rd at Muddy Monster Comics, we have Catherine Sutherland. I say we. The shop has Catherine Sutherland and Nakia Baris, a couple of the a pink Power Ranger and a yellow Power Ranger. They're going to be in store from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. on July 23rd. And at the same time, the Muddy Monster Comic Con is going to be occurring over in the, what do they call that building? They call that the Municipal Center or the
Civic Center, maybe.
Yeah. Anyway, it's just about a block over from the shop.
Yeah.
And also the Liberty Theater is going to be showing some like movie serials all day long. So there'll be a lot of stuff going on in Murfreesboro that day. So even if you aren't going to come for the comics, other things that would definitely be entertaining for you. So be sure and check that out. And of course, I'm Scott Reed. You can find me at burgcomics.com, B-U-R-G comics. And there you'll have links to my Facebook page, my Berg Comics buy, sell, trade, eBay store, TeePublic store for the handful of Berg Comics t-shirts that I have. And that will wrap it up for this episode. So again, we'll be back next with previews.
So you were right. What's that? You were right. Oh, he wanted me to say it twice. You were right. That is the first one. That's so rare. I get that. Wow.